Welcome, White Lightning Agents, to another episode of Counterintelligence. JP is away on a mission this time, so we have Ian joining us from the higher up.
Lightning HQ.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
The headquarters of the headquarters.
So this week, we are talking about Star Wars. And there's a little bit of disagreement on that.
And then I saw Jar Jar Binks just jump
Oh, that's
around like
why.
an idiot
Okay.
for
No,
30 minutes.
that's fair. That was
and
the
then
first one
throw
you
up
saw.
all over
You know,
some kid.
when
No, this is pod racing. Kabloola Gaiulja! It's like, great, thanks. I'm glad that I can only understand half of this conversation. And then some guy's car breaks and he's like, "Urla," and then he explodes. And it's like, great, what a exciting, fulfilling experience. Just take that kid's blood. Tell him that he has things in his blood. What are the things in his blood? No one knows. It's just a plot device for blood things.
I really want to watch that movie. That's way more entertaining sounding than the movie I remember.
I like the idea of just having like a segment of this of Ethan reviews movies he hates.
Also, just Ethan reviews movies. You know, see, when I saw, I don't even know how old I was when I saw Phantom Menace. It was the first one I saw in theaters, obviously, because, you know, that whole non-existing thing yet.
Wait, it was called The Phantom Menace?
Phantom Menace.
Where was the Phantom?
That's the point of a phantom. It wasn't the ever-present and easy-to-spot menace. It's kind of like the dragons and the tigers in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
According to Reddit, it was Jar Jar, which I'm sure everybody is aware of by now.
But
That's the only theory that I actually like. I wish that was in there, because then my hate for that character would be even
No,
worse.
it's actually, the Jar Jar theory is the worst idea. I really hate the Jar Jar theory, and
Yeah,
I'm
really.
really unpopular in this opinion, because that would make the movies worse. Here's the idea. Like, Jar Jar is probably, it's fair to say, somewhat poorly handled comic relief character. And that's easy to understand. Comic relief characters are hard to get right, and if you overdo them, I mean, you get Jar Jar. It's actually a case study at this point. But if instead he was supposed to be some sort of secret twist super Sith Lord,
It would make him matter.
that means that they telegraphed that character so raucously poorly. Everything about the writing actually gets worse if that's true, because there's no real indication. It's just, It actually makes the quality of the writing, it's easy to justify a bad comic relief character. It is not easy to justify your bad comic relief character actually being the big bad.
Yeah. So yeah, being a big Star Wars fan, I've watched all of the documentaries about how it was made and things.
Being Kyle's friend, I've heard all about the documentaries that he's watched about these.
And a lot of it is probably because, it's Star Wars stuff has been going on for the last year or so. I'm sure you've all seen BuzzFeed's articles about all the things you probably didn't know about Star Wars. And so you've probably seen a few of the things. But we were
Why
just
aren't
going
you
to
writing
go over...
for BuzzFeed? You should just do that.
Because I would hate myself if I was writing for BuzzFeed.
But you could do it, and then I'm actually not sure that there's an end game there.
There really isn't.
But
But
you
it's
can write
something-
for
I mean,
Cracked.
That is like the black hole of journalism. Even Cracked is kind of going...
Can you just wait? Just wait to
That's
write
next week's
the
topic.
extremely misleading titles.
Actually, I never thought that Cracked was all that bad about clickbait. It was sensationalized.
6 racist things in ancient Disney movies.
Okay, let's talk about Star Wars. We only have a
6
set amount of time.
racist things in
No,
ancient
I know you're going to
Star
try to stall, but we're talking about Star Wars, Ethan. That's what's happening. You have to just sit and listen to Star Wars for 15 minutes. One of the reasons I like the original Star Wars so much is because I've based a lot of my filmmaking perspective off of it, I guess. 1980s George Lucas was my go-to favorite director for quite a while, because he was actually really impressive and had a lot of artistic integrity and stuff when he first started.
Didn't he only make
Which
the
is-
4 movies?
What do you mean?
I'm not familiar with his that thoroughly, but I know it's there's the was it like 1138 THX 1138,
Oh yeah,
and then it's like
Yeah, he
American
made-
Graffiti,
right.
and then it's like Star Wars,
And then the other Star Wars is, which he wrote but didn't direct all of
and
them.
he was also involved in Indiana Jones,
Right.
which I don't feel he ever gets enough credit for.
Yeah, that's true. He did a lot of things correctly for what everybody kind of griped about him at later. I mean, the prequels weren't great, but the original movies were very, very, very difficult to get off the ground, and so it's always my favorite go-to story for, filmmaking under terrible conditions, because we can relate to it fairly well by not having actual resources of any kind and still trying to make good
I
stuff.
must build more resources.
I don't know what that reference
It
is.
wasn't a reference to anything. In fact, it was like,
I believe that was an off-brand meme from 2003. It's gone generic. It's over the counter now.
pretty sure that I'm an off-brand meme from
Over-the-counter memes.
2003.
You are
Is that a
all
skit idea? That's not a skit idea. We already did our meme
Off-brand
video.
memes?
We got away with one meme video with the Chuck thing.
Here, have a trail face.
Troll face.
You have been the tricked.
But the whole thing was nobody wanted to make Star Wars back then. George Lucas had to go through so much crap to make that movie happen, because during the 70s, the whole just general feel of movies at that time was kind of close to how it is now, actually. It was anti-heroes and dark, gritty kind of stuff. It was the age of, like, mobster films and, anti-heroes, that's what it was. It was heroes who still shot people, and everybody was using kind of newer age music. They had rock bands were obviously getting bigger around that time, so that was the go-to musical thing. American Graffiti, actually, George Lucas's film right before Star Wars, was much more in line with that era's type of film. So then when George is like, I want to make a space opera, he was met with some resistance. And so, yeah, just all the details of how he managed to put stuff together was, I don't even know if anybody can hear any of that is the problem. Somebody's outside pushing carts around, but
They heard that one.
I was just going to blame it on somebody poorly singing Demi Lovato out the window.
see, nobody actually can see what else is around here, so it's just a spy base. They're moving weapon racks around and stuff. It gets loud sometimes.
Setting up a drop for JP.
What was I talking about? Right, so you've probably heard most of the stories about the casting, like Harrison Ford was...
He was a carpenter.
Yeah, he was...
He was just building stuff in Spielberg's house. And he said, hey, can you read some lines? And he did, and yeah, that'll do.
I don't know if it was in Spielberg's house. I would fact
thought it
check
was.
that.
I
think it was just at the studio where they were doing it. He was probably building sets or something.
But
You're
I
better
like
at
to
reading
believe
these
it's Spielberg's
things
house.
than the
Spielberg
person
wasn't
that we got
involved
to
in the
read
first
these
Star
things.
Wars movie.
Yeah, but it makes them feel like a closer family.
Bevan
Like-
Gielberg.
That's my favorite George Lucas fact to think about.
Bevan
If you
Gielberg.
think so, at a certain, it's now gone a little bit askew. But back, I don't know, a few years ago I checked, and by best estimation, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas have roughly similar amounts of personal wealth, like in the $3.2 to $3.4 billion range or something. And that didn't actually change much with selling it to Disney, because he donated most of that to children's education, which is awesome. But anyway, think about how many amazingly successful movies Spielberg has. And think about how many amazingly successful movies Lucas has, and how many kind of successful movies Lucas has. And that still managed to put him in league with Spielberg.
And the reason for that is because of how few people actually trusted him to make a decent movie. Because he refused to go along with most of the traditional things, and so he had a lot of trouble getting funding. He ended up paying for a lot of the, which episode was it? I can't actually remember. It was either one of the original trilogy, or it may have actually been when he started episode 1 or something, that he actually ended up paying a lot out of pocket and stuff, even that far into it. But he had to come up with a bunch of practical effects companies, Industrial Light and Magic. He pushed that to being the big thing that it is now, because they came up with all the special ways to make the ships fly around and all of that for the original films, and the lightsabers and everything.
And the wipe cuts.
And the wipe cuts, that was probably them too. That was an Industrial Lights and Magic effect right there, the wipe cuts.
Very complicated.
Remember the thing you always used to rattle about is how they took a camera, shoved it onto a pane of glass, and then went...
Yeah, I assume you're talking about the opening title sequence.
Yes.
Which is, they actually just had die-cut letters that they stuck to a pane of glass in front of the black like star backdrop and just used a camera just to pan it along, and that's how you got the text scrolling away effect. And they had to, all the sets were built from hand. You can kind of see, you can see some of the sets moving. We noticed when we were watching it again recently, and which wasn't a big deal back then. That was pretty common.
They're not too far away from the days of just like matte paintings, right?
Yeah, there were a lot of matte paintings.
They were matte painted
in that movie.
But
Yeah.
like not disguised matte paintings.
But it was a very uplifting movie. It was not the same kind of feel that the general movies of that era were. He decided he wanted to use an orchestral soundtrack, and nobody else used that. He went and got John Williams, and so by the time he was all done with it, nobody wanted to distribute it or anything. And it was only it was less than 40 movie theaters that agreed to actually show it in any capacity. And when he finally signed on with a distributor, his one condition was, we get to keep the merchandising rights. Like, I get merchandising rights. And they were like, yeah, okay. That's fine, George. Don't worry about it.
A bunch of his salary for it, too.
Yeah.
It was like a weird, like, he slashed his salary down to nothing. He's like, yeah, but if there are toys, I get the toy money.
He recut the entire movie out, like him and his wife. You probably heard all the stories. Like, there's a few stories that were going on the internet of how his wife ended up giving him a lot of suggestions and helping with the actual edit that made the original movies as good as they were. And he had some editors that cut the first one, and he didn't like it, so they recut it again on their own, and they had to push the release date. And anyway, it was just all this stuff that happened.
And somehow they still got a stormtrooper bumping his head.
Yeah.
I mean...
And, but yeah, and it still worked out. And then we ended up with Star Wars. And that wasn't even the end of it, because like right after that, they got in trouble with the writers and directors guilds for doing the opening credits. He insisted on doing those, but if you're part of those guilds, there are rules. Like you have to have.
It's
credits
because he didn't put
at the
credits.
beginning. Yeah, it was because he didn't put the opening.
He had the scroll and the title.
He wanted title, text scroll, and that was it. And he got in trouble for that because the rule was you have to list like the main actors and crew at the beginning of the movie, like in every movie
Which
that happens
doesn't
now.
actually make sense, I think.
Yeah.
In a certain way, because like, I don't know, I feel like we as people who do filmmaking more are more inclined to stick around for credits and stuff, but most people are just out of there.
So they got fined for it, and then he had paid it in full, and then left the two guilds, and hasn't been back in them since. Like he just permanently left them.
I mean, what did they do for him? What is the purpose of that?
I don't know. It's you know what? It's like YouTube partners. I don't really know. What
I think it's probably. I mean, it's kind of like
it's
a
lot
union,
of legal.
right?
It's a lot of legal protection.
I'm sure there's lots of people who won't work with you if you aren't part of the guilds.
That's a big thing too. Yeah.
It's it is protection for the people involved.
It's probably like contacts and stuff too.
That helps. There are a lot of benefits, and there's a lot of things you kind of give up in exchange for it.
It's all weird. Like it's a weird fact. In Star Trek, Wrath of Khan, you have Carlo Montalban, the Khan, and he's with the weird chest outfit and stuff and everything. He has a second in command who is actually uncredited because his agent was trying to lobby for a higher level of crediting, like giving him an with blank as blank crediting or something, and it fell through at the last minute, but because they'd already gotten to the point of the negotiations where he was removed from the end credits, he's just completely uncredited.
Wow.
Second in command to Khan.
Well, that sucks.
No credits. Weird stuff. It's also why none of the names match the actors on the movie posters. That always bothers me.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's contractual what order the names are listed in.
I learned a few new things too, just kind of looking up stuff though for this episode. Mm-hmm. And one of them is that the bantha, the big hairy thing in the desert.
The space buffalo.
I was watching that and wondering, because there's a lot of effects in there. Some of them look cheesy and some of them look really good. And that was one of them. I was like, how did they get that to look so realistic?
I figured it was Jim Henson.
It's an elephant.
Oh.
It is an actual elephant that they put fur and horns on out in the desert and somehow made it hold its trunk up high enough that you couldn't see it.
That doesn't really follow in my head so well. It's like, I don't know, we're having a hard time making this prop. Okay, here's the deal. Step 1, get an elephant. Trust me, I know where I'm going with this. Step 2, we're going to need a lot of yarn.
It sounds like something we would do, though, right? Like
yes, actually, yes.
From Donut Man. I want Oh, I went to www.spieseatingsalad.com. I love it. You guys should continue to update it on your CI stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Now, excuse me while I rewatch your intro for the next couple of hours. Also, spieseatingsalad.com is an actual website. It is not linked to anything.
Yeah.
It's not Spies
If you haven't
Eating
checked it
Salad.
out yet, you should go. It's we actually made it after that first episode. We have some stock photos of us eating salad. If you have photos of Spies eating salad, send them to us, and we will put them on the website so that you can also be there.
Please do not
Also,
take
we will
pictures
take
of random
down their
people.
spy organization, because if they can be photographed taking eating salads, they're not a very good organization, and we want to eat other spy organizations.
Also, if you need stock photos for any reason, and you can come up with any reason to put a spy eating salad on like a website or something you're building, go to the site and use those photos and just try to spread them around as much as you can.
There's
Just
a subreddit for this.
for which
there-
part of that?
Abusing stock photos that have
Oh.
zero purpose outside
Ah.
of overlaying weird text on them. We could get these very popular
Good.
in the worst way possible.
From Jacob Thompson, here's a question I've been wondering for a while. Any possibilities of a Lovecraft story/inspired one in the future? Recently I've been writing my own screenplays, and I keep trying to perfect a good adaptation of some of Lovecraft's earlier public domain works. Have you read any of those, actually?
I have,
'Cause I don't
yeah.
know anything about that author in any way.
If DoodleCon doesn't tickle your Lovecraftian feelers a little bit, I mean, step one, be really horribly, even for your time, out-of-the-box racist. That helps.
Was it?
Lovecraft was like psychotically racist.
I only know about Cthulhu.
That's how you actually pronounce it.
Cthulhu, Kyle. But I mean, yeah, it is interesting to engage with Lovecraft because he's kind of a tricky. He's definitely he's not all there, obviously, but he's not just that he makes cool stories that are kind of kooky and weird, not all there. He's also psychotically racist, not all there, and it's just. But I don't know, like he's an interesting guy. But
What does he make other than Cthulhu?
he has a whole mythos. It's like there's the King in Yellow. I'm probably getting all these names wrong. Shadow over Innsmouth.
Yogg-Sothoth?
The creative director of Paizo, who makes Pathfinder, the D&D variant I use, is like a super huge Lovecraft guy. So I've absorbed a lot of Lovecraft accidentally. Like it just sort
Second wind. No, not second wind, but like second exposure, secondary exposure.
of secondhand Lovecraft.
Yeah, there.
Secondhand Lovecraft, which sounds like a way more pleasant experience than it is. T. Watson. We do Christmas in July in Australia, but it's not as big as actual Christmas. It's more games and for the novelty of a white Christmas. We play cricket at Christmas and sit in the pool until dinner because we can't be in the house with the turkey cooking because it's way too hot. Smiley face. And yet all our wrapping paper and decorations are still covered in snowflakes and snowmen.
See, what I got from that is that Australians get 2 Christmases, which is somehow more Christmas than Americans do.
They
Which
deserve
is
it. They've
really
survived.
impressive.
Surviving 6 months in Australia is like surviving a year elsewhere.
But yeah, that's interesting because you didn't watch the episode, so you wouldn't know. But last time
I read the comments on the episodes. I got a lot of the content from the episodes from the comments.
we were asking because we didn't know how like Southern Hemisphere worked because seasons and things, but
Because we are not smarter than a 5th grader.
and forgot to look that up before the show started.
We're awesome at this.
Thank you all for joining us for this episode. Remember to leave comments on comments for us to answer in the community comments, and also any suggestions you have for topics, which we will get to in future episodes. We just haven't quite yet. The wider the topic and the more
Lighthearted it is.
silly. We like silly stuff.
It just has to be weird, really.
Yeah.
It just has to be bizarre. It just has to
Something
make
that
you
we
go,
definitely wouldn't know.
"What?"
That's the thing. We're trying to, because we're just trying to come up with like random things that you probably don't know about and that we probably don't know about because we enjoy
That's
learning
why
them.
we did Star Wars this episode.
Something that would make a good Cracked article 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So go browse Cracked, come back to us, and we will start reposting Cracked content that Cracked has reposted. And I think at that point it actually becomes a compost that you can use in your garden.
In your internet garden.
No, real garden.
Next episode we'll have Ian again. We'll be talking about what are we talking about?
We'll be talking about Dr. John Dee and Edward Kelly. Don't Wikipedia them, it ruins it.
So that sounds exciting. This is a terrible sign off. Why are we so bad at ending things?
Let's try it again. Ask me what the next episode's about.
Ian, what's the next episode about?
Next episode is about the future of Britain in 16th century, involving alchemy, angels, and talking to them via radio.
Those are the kind of topics we're talking about, so leave those kinds of things in the comments. We will eventually use them once we get to, get past all of our multiple episode recording sessions, and you will see your topic show up eventually if they're good enough to talk about. So, see you guys next week. This video will now self-destruct.